in your practice, how many, I mean, you've done this since 1982, right? Or before that. Have you ever
February of 82?
Have you ever stopped and tried to figure out how many you've engaged?
No, I know it's way into hundreds. I thought one time, because see, there was a time when I was probably working with 2 or 3 a day, because word got out there's this Baptist pastor, and he's not afraid of this stuff. And I had pastors sending their people to me, Pastor Farkelson from the EV Free Church, and whoever. And I learned that you can get so caught up that you can end up being exhausted and not get your own job done. So I said, I don't put a shingle. There's no shingle that says exorcist is here today. I decided that I would control the schedule instead of a person's need, because no matter, every call I get, Pastor, my need is desperate. Pastor, mine could be life or death. Pastor, I say, so's 50 I've got on a list right now to get back to. 50, 25? Yeah, I get them every single day. So here's what I do. I've got a job to do as a pastor in my church. That's my first priority. I've never charged anybody a dime. I hear people say, oh, they just make a lot of money. I've never charged anybody a dime. I'll just say, I'm a pastor. I do this as part of my ministry. But because of that, I work you into my ministry as I'm able to do it. You can find someone else who'll take you in today. Go. God bless you. They know what they're doing. I'm happy. For me, I've got 14 people I'm already talking with that are in front of you that we're trying to figure out what's going on. Plus, tonight I've got a meeting with small group leaders from 6:30 to 8. And I don't want my wife saying, who is that masked man? Or my kids saying, what does daddy look like? In other words, there's going to be a priority. And there's nothing wrong with me saying, you know what, if it took 40 years for you to screw your life up, you do not have to meet with me in the next 4 hours. I've got a time open on such and such a time. Does that work for you? Well, you're just not being kind. Other than, who do you want me to bump off the list so I can move you in? Are you being kind? In other words, I learned, I wish there were more Christians doing this. There wouldn't be lists. Just say, man, you're in Alabama, you're in Huntsville. Here's where you can go. I wish we had a network together of people that would work with this, so that nobody had to feel like, I'm tired sometimes, man. But so what am I saying? I'm saying, I don't know. I thought I started to write. I've probably worked with a couple of thousand people over 40 years. And people would think that's not possible. There can't be that many Christians that have that kind of problem. And then I thought, well, no one's going to believe that anyway, because most pastors aren't dealing with that many people. And so I just said hundreds because I have absolute certainty it's in the hundreds. So in that book, I just said, over the years, I've worked with hundreds of people. I'll tell you a story. I don't know if this is funny, but I hope it's helpful. I was doing Janet's show. I mean, I've done so many different interviews. I mean that as a praise. I'm glad now people are asking, hey, we want to understand this stuff, not make fun of it. But a pastor, I think it was Janet's show. Maybe I need to back up. Maybe it was a different one. I get them mixed up sometimes. Anyway, pastor said, I'm 76 years old. I'm a pastor. I said, great. He says, I'm glad you're working with this. I said, well, thank you very much, Pastor. And I said, you've been at it a long time. If you're 76, you're still pastoring. Yeah, he was bivocational. I make tents, but I still pastor. I said, well, God bless you, Pastor. And then he said, you didn't mention at one time in the time you've been doing this, the need to fast. I said, oh. And he said, I have to fast a week before I'll work with somebody. And I tell them I have to have at least a week to fast if I think I'm going to work with them. And he said, I'll fast for a week, and then I find myself very effective in making the demons go. If I don't fast for a week, I'm not very effective. And so he said, I'm just wondering why you didn't mention fasting. I said, Pastor, do demons leave because you fast or because you've got delegated authority from Christ to make them go? And then I said, Pastor, is that authority any different, whether you fasted 1 day, 2 days, or no days? Well, no, it would be the same delegated authority that was given to us. I said, Pastor, how many people do you work with in a month or a week or a year? He said, I usually work with 3 or 4 people a year. I said, Pastor, I can work with 3 or 4 people easily in a week. I said, if I agreed to fast 1 week for every person I work with, I would be dead because I would never get to eat. So I said, I appreciate the fact that you're in the battle. But I said, Pastor, would you tell somebody that in receiving Christ or having their sins forgiven, I don't mean if I use salvation or forgiveness, one or the other. I said, would you tell them that They can confess their sin, and God's faithful to forgive as long as they cry to show they were genuinely repentant. No. Would you tell them that he's faithful and just to forgive as long as they promise they'll never again fall into that sin? Well, how can they make a promise that they don't know whether they can keep or not? So you see, when people add hoops to God makes a promise, he keeps his promise, it ends up a problem. And I say, I know you didn't mean it that way, but you've added a hoop. You've said that successful deliverance can't happen unless you have fasted. I said, what happens if you don't have a week to fast for somebody? What happens if you have a missionary that flew in? You didn't even know they were coming in. You said, I'm sorry, fly back to Egypt because I can't work with you because I didn't have a, well, no. I say, see, your delegated authority is the same. Don't add hoops. Well, what about Matthew 17? I say, now this scares the ones that are King James only people, but I'm not a King James only person, you know. They'll say, well, it says it only came out with fasting and prayer. I say, actually, look at your footnotes. You got a good study Bible? Every single one of them, they'll say, well, the word fasting isn't even there in the best texts. I'll say, what it says is they come out by prayer. Well, that's true of all demons. You're praying that God will energize your prayer, make them go. That's why I say the Holy Spirit and we command you. I'm not doing that on my own. But I said, Pastor, do you see what I'm, he says, yeah. I set up fasting as kind of an added qualifier where the scripture doesn't say. So you're saying that's not necessary. I said, if you want to fast, fast. That's great. It really focuses you. But to make that a qualifier, you said when I fast, I'm effective with demons. When I don't fast, I'm not. That's what you said, yeah. That means the effectiveness to deal with them depends upon you. Does it depend upon your work for salvation? Does it depend upon how repentant someone thinks you are for forgiveness? Does it depend upon how much work you did and make it? No, it's all about delegated authority, what Christ does. I said, don't ever forget that, Pastor. Mm-hmm. Now, that was instructed not only for him, but for other people listening. It wasn't insincere. It was just based on something that wasn't true. There's a group that's well known, and now I call them New Apostolic Reformation. I'm glad people are getting saved, but I think some of the stuff they teach is absolutely dangerous. I'm sorry, but I do. But part of the teaching, at least from some in that movement, is that pastors can deal with grunt demons, but only apostles can deal with all demons. That's part of what they teach. In other words, if it's a real big demon, you have to find an apostle from the New Apostolic Reformation movement because they're the ones that have the delegated authority to deal with the big bad demons. But your pastor, he can probably help with the grunt ones if they're just little buck privates. Where does the text anywhere say that the authority that was delegated to you is dependent upon how much authority the demon has that you're confronting? I have given you authority to tread upon the serpents, scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy. They shall in no wise harm you. Do not rejoice because spirits are subject to you. Rejoice because your names are recorded in heaven. Go back to the 2 Corinthians, chapter 10. Our weaponry is not fleshly, it's divinely powerful for tearing down, unless it's a real strong demon. If it's a real strong demon, you've got to call Pastor so-and-so from church such and such because he or she is the only one that's, self-anointed themselves an apostle, so they can do that. I go, I'm sorry. I'm sure you're sincere. I'm glad you're in the battle, but the text doesn't say that. So you don't worry about the authority structure of demons. Why should I let them think I'm impressed with them about anything? They're losers. The truth is their boss is a loser. The truth is their boss followed the wrong one. Their boss got kicked out. A third of his, says Revelation 12, went with him. They now know what their end is. Just like when, remember the Gerasene with Jesus, have you come to torment us early? I thought they even know their time's short. Have you come to torment us early? I mean, at least give us a nice run. No, I thought to myself, why would people who have been delegated the authority of Christ think the best way to deal with demons is to run from them? Makes no sense.